Today we're going to make some quality wooden utensils that pretty much anybody can use. This will be an information-rich video where I tell you about all the different tools and techniques I tried, as well as everything I learned along the way. Let's jump right in and take a look at the materials we're going to be starting with. I've rounded up some scraps of cherry at different thicknesses and some hard maple. I've heard cherry is a good choice for wood utensils, and I want to try maple because, knowing what I already know about maple, I think it's going to hold up well and clean pretty easily. So a couple of cherry spatulas is where I'm going to start. Over at the miter saw, I'm using a template that I cut with my laser. I could have just as easily used my little bamboo spatula that I already have though, the one that I'm trying to improve upon. So let's go ahead and get a couple of those traced, and then we're over to the bandsaw for our first cuts. So at the bandsaw we have the luxury of not having to be super precise, because we're going to some stuff we're going to whittle from here, and then other stuff we're going to go right to the oscillating spindle sander and shape it and clean it up real nice. So this first cut's going to go actual speed, just to give you an idea how fast this process is. Pretty pumped with how the bandsaw is performing right now. It's going right through this, no problem, even though I have a ripping blade on there. We got no pressure to be super accurate though, so we're really just trying to remove material and set up for the sander later. That should do just fine for those first two cherry spatulas. Now I'm going to try my hand at some spoontulas. So these are going to be spatulas with a little bowl carved out, make them multifunctional. So this is a piece of maple that is slightly thicker. I'm going to try to be a little more precise with the bandsaw here, take more material off because maple's sort of tough to sand away. I actually scribed that piece with my laser, but you could just trace a spatula again. It was super unnecessary. I just wanted to see, wanted to feel it out. The precise lines are nice, but not necessary. Okay, these are far enough on the bandsaw. Let's bring them over to the drill press and work on getting a hole in the handle so we can hang these up. So I'm taking a small drill bit, doing a pilot hole, and then coming at it from either side with a wider bit. This is kind of a Forstner bit. And you're going to get a really clean hole that way. No tear out. This guy is the Wen oscillating edge belt and spindle sander, and I think it's essential to this process. I'm hitting it with an abrasive strip right now that is just going to clear off the belt for me. Kind of helps them last longer and not get burn on them. So there's not really a steep learning curve to this thing. You're going to be effective with it. It removes material really quick. I have a 150 grit belt on this, and I actually switched to a 180 grit belt later because it removes material so quick even on those finer grits. I was honestly kind of scared to put something like 80 on there. So now I've taken these about as far as I need to on the edge belt sander, and I put a nice little taper on them. The ones I have now hurt to hold, and they don't have a nice taper like this one does. So it's hard to use them pretty much. So those were the two things I focused on. I ordered these gouging bits as a set from Amazon. They were very inexpensive, I think $9 or so. I'm not sure which shape is going to be best, but I'm going to try a couple different ones and see if these can remove material for something like the spoontulas or a deeper spoon quickly. So I felt like I had to get a foothold on this before I could start using these bits, so I took a sharp chisel, a really small one, and just kind of gouged up the maple in the middle, made a divot. Then I took this first gouging bit. This is the one I ended up having the most success with, and you'll see it works pretty well, but it leaves some pretty serious scars too. So I'm just moving and grooving in my shark pajamas, trying to feel this bit out, see what works, what kind of speed on the drill, what kind of angle. And here's a shot of the bit working in real time if you're curious how fast it can remove material. Ugh, that small bit did not work as well in the drill. You can see we got some serious cleanup to do after that, but stick around because we're going to throw those bits in the drill press later and see what they can do there. So this was a great project to excuse myself in buying a whittling kit. I've now found myself the owner of this satchel of various knives. This is the one I'm the most interested in to try to rock this spoontulas situation or some deeper spoons, and it is way too big for me to one hand. I'm not that weak, but man, I had to two-hand this knife, clamp the piece down. That was the only shot I had. And while it wasn't really effective in shaping at first, I eventually got into a groove, and it was totally worth even just scraping really shallow with this thing just to get rid of those marks from the gouging bit. So you can see right here, I start to kind of get into a groove with it, get some bigger shavings off, and really start to remove some material in a really even way. Still really hard. I had a lot more luck with this knife later, so stick around for that. This is the main carving knife with the set. If you're taking material off in a significant way, you want to use this guy. I use this guy most of the time, pretty much all the time. Because I am such a rookie at this, I'm sticking mostly to pushing cuts to try to minimize the amount of times I poke myself with it. So this is maple, really not a good choice to demonstrate on because it's tough to whittle compared to a lot of other stuff. Even the cherry's easier, but still you can see this thing removes material quickly. So if you get good, you can take material off quick. I think a live piece of wood is preferred for whittlers, but you can still do it with the kiln dried stuff. That said, the most whittling I did on any of these was from this cherry blank that I cut on the bandsaw off camera. I just cut it from that thicker piece I showed you earlier in a spoon shape, and I whittled it from there with the knife. It took forever and so long that I feel I needed to cheat on that bowl and start it with the Forstner bit. So here I am giving it the honest college try here, and just it's taken way too long. I gotta find a way to cheat here. What I should speak to is if you do finish things off with one knife for another, you pretty much don't have to sand. It's better not to. So that spoon became this spoon on the left. I ended up bringing it to the oscillating spindle sander because it was so chunky. I craved the uniformity, and I sanded all my whittling away. To finish the bowl off, I used those gouging bits from earlier, which were pretty quick, and then tried to hand sand the bowl, and it took forever. I gotta find a better way. For this next spoon, we are going to try some various things to pick up speed here. So I'm going to use the bandsaw to take off more material. I'm going to give it more of the sweep of the spoon that I ended up with right off the bandsaw. And then I'm going to round the front a little bit with the bandsaw as well and just set myself up way better to have less sanding to do. I would wager that's going to save us a little bit of time and help us eye how we want the spoon to end up. Okay, so this time I'm going to use the Forstner bit again, but I'm going to cheat better. I'm going to make 2 shallow punches on the ends and 1 deeper punch in the middle. Just be careful as you start the bit where you've already used the bit. It can be a little funky with the Forstners. Let it bite in. I decided to throw this gouging bit into the drill press to see how well it could do there, and I loved it immediately. I much prefer to move the spoon around this stationary but moving bit to let it eat material, and yeah, it worked really well. This is actual speed, but what I wanted to try next was actually upping the speed on the drill press. So I did that by adjusting the pulleys. I did that off camera. And then material started melting away at lighter touches. So I think that's the way to use these bits. They might be meant more for a rotary tool than a drill, I'm not sure. But yeah, light touches at a very high speed just hogged material away. I was able to do these nice sweeps and really round the bowl. I didn't find too much of a use for those other bits from the set, but I did put this little guy on to try to get rid of the marks from the Forstner bit, like the rim and the deep punch in the middle. As another time-saving measure, I decided to try to use the hook knife again here to scrape and really just get rid of those marks off the gouging bit. Try to set myself up for some really quick sanding, and I was really successful with that. I actually found the knife easier to use on the more broad contours of the deep spoon. Just seems a friendlier angle to it. So I actually used it to deepen the spoon too while I was at it and get everything nice and symmetrical. Really pleased with how this performed, but I still clamped it to the workbench and used 2 hands. So I finished it off with hand sanding like the other one from there, but stay tuned because next time I'm going to try some sanding drill bits on the drill press. We got spatulas, we got deep spoons, we got spoontulas that just need some final sanding on the oscillating spindle sander. These 2 spoons were a doozy. The one on the right is the second one I did, and I decided to whittle that one too just to see if I could get a little faster at it, and it came out better, like twice as good as the first one. I almost don't want to sand it on the oscillating spindle sander, but I'm still going to. The bowl was much, much faster. That second technique worked. Going to do that in the future, try to build on that. We are on the home stretch now. Some final sanding, got the 180 belt on there, and then we're going to do some hand sanding, and I'll show you a technique to keep these smooth in the long run. I forgot to drill holes in the ends of the spoons, so I'm doing it the same way as before, where I take a narrower bit, go all the way through, pilot bit, you know, and then meet on either side with a bigger bit to get clean holes. I'm taking a 220 sanding disc to these at this point and just trying to blend any raised areas together, do some final shaping, and get everything nice and smooth. We're nearly there now, but we got to take this one last step. This is called raising the grain. So we're just taking some water to these. This is not the finish, but it does give you a preview of what things are going to look like. So what we're doing is raising the wood fibers on the surface, and those are going to stick up after they get wet the first time, no matter if we do it or if the end user of this does it. So if we do it and then we knock them back down with sandpaper before we throw the finish on, they're going to stay smooth after the customer or the user washes them. So I'm using Howard's Food Safe cutting board oil for these. You can use any Food Safe mineral oil. You're probably going to like that. And then we might hit these with a wax. We might not. Maybe we'll save that for part 2. But for my first wooden utensils I ever made, I'm definitely digging what I'm seeing as I put the oil in the bowl of this first spoon. Really nice grain. So I hit these heavy with what felt like excess oil, but if you've used this before, you know they're gonna drink that right up. Some people like to soak their tools in an oil bath. I don't like to use that much at once if I can avoid it, so I'm gonna give these multiple heavy coats and just let them drink what they want and then wipe the excess off after they're done drinking. So we learned a lot. I'm pretty pumped with how these came out. I got kind of lucky with the grain orientation for these different pieces, like the bold grain on this cherry, that darker grain, that's pretty sweet. Digging the taper that I got on these. The spoontulas are insanely practical, I can already tell. I think that's gonna be like when I make a bunch of these for myself, I'm definitely gonna make a couple spoontulas. Stick around for part 2, we're gonna make some different stuff, explore some different techniques, and try to get faster with all this. Until next time, thanks for joining us.